بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه يكافئ مزيدا يا ربنا لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك ولعظيم سلطانك سبحانك لا نحصي ثناء عليك أنت كما أثنيت على نفسك فلك الحمد حتى ترضى ولك الحمد إذا رضيت ولك الحمد بعد الرضا اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد في الأولين وصل وسلم على سيدنا محمد في الآخرين وصلي وسلم على سيدنا محمد في كل وقت وحين وصلي وسلم على سيدنا محمد في الملأ الأعلى إلى يوم الدين وصلي وسلم على سيدنا محمد حتى ترث الأرض ومن عليها وأنت خير الوارثين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may bless those who are present, inshallah, and likewise those who made the intention to be present before some reason that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may have delayed them, prevented them from being present. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, Niyatul mu'min khayrun min amalihi, that the intention of the believer is better than the deeds or the works that he does. Alhamdulillah, we have a beautiful topic, and it is a beautiful topic as we had our dear brother described. Anytime we look at the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, we are being immersed in the beauty of the divine. And sometimes we may engage parts of his life, which likewise we become immersed inside the majestic nature of the divine, Jalla fil Ula. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is the one who makes manifest, we hear the connection, or maybe it wasn't clarified, the connection between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, these 99 names or the 99 qualities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the life and times of the Blessed Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallama, because the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, according to one of our great Imams, whose name is Imam al-Suhrawardi radiallahu ta'ala an, is the one who lives or manifests all of them 99 qualities and counting. And takhallaqa bi akhlaq ar-Rahman, that's what the great Imam said, that he is the one who inculcated all of the qualities of the beneficent, the most merciful. That's the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. We see a beautiful tradition in the Sahih of Imam Muslim radiallahu ta'ala an, where our mother Aisha, the blessed wife of the Prophet ﷺ, was asked about the Prophet ﷺ by Sahl bin Hisham. She was asked, كيف كان خلق رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم? How was the actual character of the Messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم? And she said, ألا تقرأ القرآن? Do you not recite the Quran? Do you not recite the Quran? She said, كان خلقه القرآن. That his character was the Quran. And another narration, she says, كان Quran yamshi bayn al-nas, that she was the Quran that walked, he was the Quran that walked amongst people. So when we study the Prophet ﷺ, we study the Quran. And when we study the Quran, we study Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Quran being that uncreated word that is representative of Allah, Jalla fil Ula. Some of the Christian theologians want to say that if God, or the word of God, is imbibed in Jesus, the son of Mary, in Christianity, then in Islam it is imbibed inside of the Quran in and of itself. Okay, that is what the word of God made manifest, and the Prophet ﷺ was that word of God made manifest. There are many disciplines that we could all choose to study, because knowledge is very important. Our tradition is based upon two things, knowledge and practice, and they're both extremely important. Yet when we see in the times in which we live in, and we see that the disastrous events that seem to occur inside of the daily life of the Muslim, that it's important for each and every single one of us to try and seek the cause, the reasons why, and begin to follow them causes so we can eradicate them in order to replace them with causes that bring about some type of success and proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala strikes an example of the great Dhul Qarnayn in the Quran, فَأَتْبَعَ سَبَبًا. That Dhul Qarnayn, that individual, that righteous individual who ruled the east and the west, i.e. ruled the entire earth, one of the only few people in the history of man to rule the entire earth. And one of the things that we see about Dhul Qarnayn is his seeking of the causes of things. Why? There's a great sociologist, English sociologist who died recently called Charles Tilly, who had a book called Why? The reasons why events take place, the reason why human beings do what they do. And that's important for each and every single one of us, because the whys in Islam always usually return back to things which connect with knowledge and things which connect with practice. And the beauty of seerah, the topic that is at hand, studying the life and times of the Prophet ﷺ, is that it connects with knowledge, all knowledges. You see, it's not fiqh, but you will find fiqh inside of the seerah jurisprudence. It's not theology, aqidah, but you will find theology, aqidah inside of the seerah, the life and times of the Messenger ﷺ. It's not spirituality, the cleansing, purification of the heart or the soul, but in it you will find the cleansing of what? Of the heart and the soul inside of seerah. In fact, that the ulama say that every single discipline that the Muslims have ever brought forth onto the face of the earth needs seerah, taftaqir ila seerah. And he is reliant upon seerah in order to bring clarity. وَلَكِنَّ السِّيرَةَ لَا تَفْتَقِرْ إِلَى شَيْءٍ. But seerah needs no other discipline. It is a complete and whole discipline. One of my teachers, his name is Dr. Nuruddin Aitar, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve him, is considered one of the foremost hadith specialists today in Damascus. He's in Damascus and Halab. That he's wrote many, many great books, voluminous books in various subjects, especially inside of the Quran and especially inside of the Sunnah al-Mutahhara, that which relates to hadith. But he wrote what we can be considered a pamphlet, less than 10 pages, on the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. And then he began to distribute that pamphlet before it was published on many of the great ulama of Damascus, the greatest, the great scholars of Damascus, to which they all added or subtracted. And he eventually edited the text and published the text. It's called the Nafahat al-Itriyah. It's called the fragrant breezes, divine breezes. Very small pamphlet. But he said, despite the fact that I've written many books, voluminous books, in various disciplines, that is the greatest work that I've ever written. Less than 10 pages, summarizing the life and times of the Blessed Messenger ﷺ, as well as aspects of his great features, as well as beautiful features, as well as his moral disposition. So when we study the Prophet ﷺ, we are studying everything. Because the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he is that microcosm that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created. And one of the unfortunate things which regards to us as Muslims is our ignorance, and I mean ignorance in the real sense of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. As we said, that our success or failure relates back to knowledge of Allah, knowledge of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, as well as practice of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, i.e. the inculcation and implementation of his sunnah. This is the nature of where you see the success of the nations of Islam, as well as what? The fall of the nations of Islam. When they closely adhere to the path. And that's why our scholars will be very, very particular in the words they choose to call a discipline or to call anything. Very, very particular with regards to names. وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about our father Adam, he speaks about Adam in the sense that Allah taught him the names. i.e. the mastery of the names likewise leads to the mastery of the realities that are beyond their names or their names represent. So our scholars have been very, very particular about names. So when they choose a name like seerah, seerah means a path that one leads, a way of conduct, how one conducts themselves in life. And they take that name and apply it to the life. The life of the Messenger, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. It is trying to show us as willing students, willing adherents to his way, that his life and times is very, very, very important. When we ask, sometimes they will speak about the 10 considerations. Sometimes we should look at when we study any type of science. If you want to study fiqh, there are usually in the beginning 10 considerations you should ordinarily look at, or you study aqidah, theology, legal theory, or usul al-fiqh, or any of the other type of disciplines of Islam. There are usually 10 considerations. For most of the considerations is the name, and the name of this science is what is called seerah, as we made mention of. Likewise, from amongst the considerations is what they call the wadi', the originator of the science. That's what they say. إِنَّ مَبَادِيَ كُلِّ فَنٍ عَشْرَ الْحَدُّ وَالْمَوْضُوعُ ثُمَّ الثَّمَرَ وَالْفَضْلُهُ وَإِسْمُهُ وَالْوَاضِعُ. That's the way, the Nabawiyy is the one who originates the science. And here most of the ulama are going to say that the great originator of the science was an individual called Sayyidina Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. And so we can just get a feel for those who were present, inshallah, because it's important. As the Prophet ﷺ said, خَاطِبَ النَّاسَ عَلَى قَدْرِ عُقُولِهِمْ, in the hadith of Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib, speak to people in accordance to their intellects, or in accordance to their readiness. We want to see where people are at with regards to their knowledge of the seerah. So sometimes it's you asking me questions, but likewise it's also me asking you questions also. So when we hear the name Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, I want to see like those who have not heard the name Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. I'm going to see a hand. If you've not heard that name before, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. And if the hand's not up, I may pick you to answer. So inshallah, honesty is the best policy, as they say. So Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. Okay, these are people that we should know. Okay? And alhamdulillah, it's all good. Because they say that, say I do not know, and you will know. That's what they say. La adri nisful ilm. I don't know is half of knowledge. The problem is when somebody doesn't know and they don't admit to their ignorance. That can be called what Imam al-Ghazali calls complex. And he says complex ignorance has no cure. Okay? So the one who says, when I studied in Mauritania, the scholars will say, قُلْ لَا أَدْرِي حَتَّى تَدْرِي. Say I don't know until you do know. It's the path to knowledge. So Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas is one of the great companions. And we'll suffice to say that he is one of the 10 who are guaranteed paradise. Okay, that's why it's very important. He's of the 10 people that the Prophet ﷺ, by statement, guaranteed that they are in paradise. Although the ulama say there are more than 10, but these 10, by the word of the Blessed Messenger, Sadiq al-Masduq, the one who does not lie. Impossible for him to lie by the nature of his innate constitution, his created form. He cannot lie. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, is that Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas is from those who will be guaranteed paradise, radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And he is usually attributed to being the originator of the science of the seerah, because he used to gather his children and he would speak about the life and times of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and he would say, هَذِهِ مَجْدُكُمْ, that this is your majd. Your majd means your glory. And he's not just speaking to his children. You see, it's not related to the khusus al-sabab. The ulama say in the sciences of philology, al-ibra bi-umum al-lafz, la bi-khusus al-sabab, that we take into consideration the general application of what was said, not the particular reason what brought about that statement. I.e. that Sayyidina Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas is not speaking to his children per se. He speaks to his children and beyond, to each and every single one of us, that our majd, our glory is in the life and times of the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. فَانْظُرُوا إِلَى مَجْدِكُمْ. He said, ponder deeply your glory, i.e. the life and times of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So we would see that this would be part of the way of the early generation, and part of the way of the second glorious generation, and the third glorious generation, as the Prophet ﷺ in Sahih al-Bukhari, he said, خَيْرُ النَّاسِ قَرْنِي, that the best of generations is my generation. The generation that with Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas was from amongst the most foremost of that generation. ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ, then those who follow them, i.e. their students, the next generation, ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ, and then those who come after them as the third generation, the glorious Salaf. And they are glorious because they took care and paid deep consideration to their glory, their majd, which is encapsulated inside of the life and times of the glorious Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. We will see that the ulama are going to, or where we should start with regards to this, is in a sense admittance of our ignorance of who he is, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And the more we delve into the life and times of the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, it's a paradox, the more ignorant we become. The more we think, in the outward sense, that we gain more knowledge of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we only increase in ignorance of him sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Two of the names that we should take into consideration, the name of whom Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab. And Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab, who again is one of the 10 who was guaranteed paradise, and is one of the foremost of the companions. It suffices as a praise to Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab that the Prophet ﷺ said that if there was a prophet to come after me, it would have been Umar ibn al-Khattab. وَلَكِنْ لَا نَبِيَّ بَعْدِ. But there is no prophet after me. This is a great Umar, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, many times that he will make a statement and the Quran will be revealed verbatim in the words of Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab. That's i.e. the word of God corresponded to the words of Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab, such that we see a second great individual we should all likewise take care to note, whose name is Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib. And Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib would say that on the tongue of Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab was an angel called Sakina. Either every time Umar would speak, his words would be angelic, such that it was as if he was like a puppet, and the puppeteer was an angel called Sakina. Okay, Ali ibn Abi Talib is another great individual who we should all know likewise, a very, very complex individual, such that we see the latter days of Islam are somewhat, wouldn't say the word divided, but saying Ali ibn Abi Talib, Ali becomes that problematic figure which causes a group of the Muslims to misinterpret his vast and complex reality, such that they become Shi'an. They become a group that secedes from the main body, the body of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, due to the complexity of that great individual, the father of Ahl al-Bayt, the brother of the Messenger of God sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the one who the Prophet sallallahu placed in the station of Haruniyya. He said, you are to me just as Harun was to Musa alayhi salam. That's the great Ali ibn Abi Talib, huge great individual, the one the Prophet ﷺ called Bab Madinatul Ilm, the gateway to knowledge. That's Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib. And Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib, despite his rank, and Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab, despite his rank also, both of them were instructed by the Messenger of God ﷺ to go and seek out another individual. This is the fourth name we will hear today. And his name is Sayyidina Uwais al-Qarni. Uwais al-Qarni. Uwais al-Qarni is from the second glorious generation. And according to many of the scholars, they consider him the greatest of that generation. In the same way we may speak about Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. Abu Bakr, the great Abu Bakr, has been the greatest of the first glorious generation. Many are of the opinion that it's whom Sayyidina Uwais al-Qarni, who is the great one of the second generation. And if we don't know names, then we don't know names. But many of us who may study the life and times of great people, we may hear the lives of Sayyidina Sa'id ibn Musayyib, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, who is the most knowledgeable person of the second generation. He's the forefather of the school of Imam Malik, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, the Imam of Medina in his time, the son-in-law of Sayyidina Abu Hurairah, radiallahu ta'ala anhu. But they consider Uwais greater than him. Many of us hear about the great Hassan al-Basri, radiallahu ta'ala, and the one who was born and raised in the great city of Madinatul Munawwara, and his father was a servant in the house of one of the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and his mother was a servant in the house of another of the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he said, as a young child, I used to jump from the two roofs of the houses of the Messenger of God sallallahu alaihi wasallam between my father and mother. That's the great Hassan al-Basri radiallahu ta'ala anhu, that the people of spirituality all endeavor to trace their lineage or their transmission back to that great individual. Yet despite his greatness, and he is great, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, this individual called Sayyidina Uwais al-Qarni was considered greater. And the Prophet ﷺ instructed these two great companions, Umar ibn al-Khattab and Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib, to seek Sayyidina Uwais al-Qarni out. He's somebody who lived in the time of the Messenger ﷺ, but Allah did not foreordain for him to meet the Messenger. That's why he's not from the first generation. Although he lives in the time of the Messenger of God, Muhammad ﷺ, he never meets him ﷺ, even though his blessed feet stood on the great soil of Medina. When he stepped inside of Madinatul Munawwara, the Prophet ﷺ had gone outside of Madinatul Munawwara. And he was faced with a great dilemma, a dilemma that many of us would not pay due consideration to. Why? We're not people who follow the sabab, these causative reasons that we gain knowledge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the creative acts of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on our limbs. Why? When he's in Madinatul Munawwara, he has what? Two choices. First choice is to wait, sit and wait. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ has gone, but surely the Prophet ﷺ will return, because the Prophet's ultimate retaining place is that blessed piece of land that is considered the blessed land, that blessed land where he now resides in the entire cosmos, according to the absolute consensus of the scholars of the Muslims, that blessed place where he resides now, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he will return, and it's just upon saying Uwais al-Qarni to remain, sit patiently. But he has another option, and it's a dilemma that he faces. What is that? And that he is in the great servitude to his mother. He is a khadim to his mother. He looks after his mother. He's from Yemen. He's from the Yemen, and he's left his mother for a short while just to see the blessed Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then to return back to the service of his mother. When he doesn't find the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Medina, does he sit and wait, or does he return back? It's an easy choice for many of us when we sit 1500 years later, but for somebody of the stature of Sayyidina Uwais al-Qarni, who understands that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's obedience has been encapsulated in the obedience of one's parents, he heads south and returns back to the obedience of his mother, radiyallahu ta'ala an. And it's that and many other things that render this individual great with Allah, great with the Messenger of God sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and great with them people who seek the proximity of Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab and Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib, after the death of the Messenger, they continue to try and seek this great individual just to ask for on the instruction of the Messenger of God sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu becomes the first leader. He comes and he goes back to Rafiq al-A'la after 2 years. And then Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab becomes the leader of the Islamic polity. And when Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab is the leader of the polity, he would gather all of those who were in the Hajj. And he would tell the people of Hajj that everybody who is not from Yemen, sit. And they would all sit. And then he would address the people of Yemen, those who remain standing. And he said, let all of the Yemenis sit, except those who are from the tribe of Qarn. And then the people of Qarn, the Qarnis, would remain standing. And then Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab, alongside Ali ibn Abi Talib, would address the people of Qarn and said, Afikum, amongst you, is there amongst you an individual called Uwais bin Amr al-Qarni, Uwais the son of Amr al-Qarni, to which they would say no. And this would become the regular annual duty of Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab and Ali ibn Abi Talib every time, every Hajj. Until on one Hajj, they begin to get the message that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam will not instruct them to seek except that that individual could be sought, could be found. So they begin to say that it's not going too well here. So when the people of Qarn remain standing and they say there's nobody from amongst those called Uwais al-Qarni, Sayyidina Umar asked, is every single one of you here? Are you all here? To which they say yes, except one individual that we pay no attention to, who we have left looking after all of our goods out on the outskirts of the city. Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab said, I said, everybody bring him. And when they brought him, sure enough, that was whom? The great individual, Uwais al-Qarni. The Prophet described as somebody who had been afflicted by leprosy, but then he'd been cured from leprosy, and all that remained was like a farthing's amount of that leprosy on his cured body, radiallahu ta'ala an. And that's why we see the great hadith where the Prophet ﷺ talks about those type of people who are on the outskirts, the ones who people pay no attention to. Rubba ash'ath akhbar, ذو تمرين مدفوعا بالأبواب لو أقسم على الله لأبر. The Prophet ﷺ said that there are many disheveled, impoverished, barefooted, worthless individuals, those who are rejected at the doors of people, one you would pay no attention to. لو أقسم على الله, were they to demand from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, demand, not ask, demand give me right now, لَأَبَرَّهُ. Allah would give them whatever they demanded. And when you hear or you study that hadith in the science of a hadith, that they always interpreted that hadith through the story of Sayyidina Uwais bin Amir al-Qarni radiallahu ta'ala. And when Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab addresses him, Anta Uwais al-Qarni, are you Uwais al-Qarni? To which he answers in the affirmative, despite his deep, modest disposition. Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab said, I am Umar ibn Khattab, and this is Ali bin Abi Talib. And we've been instructed by the Messenger of God, Muhammad, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, to seek you out and just to ask you for dua. To which the first thing he says is, أَذَكَرَنِي بِيِسْمِ. Did he mention me by name? Sayyidina Uwais radiallahu ta'ala and said, did the Messenger of God mention me by name? To which they said, yes, he mentioned you by name. فَبَكَى Uwais. And Sayyidina Uwais then begins to cry profusely by virtue of the fact that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned him by name. Not just by name. So therefore we rewind back to the likes of Sayyidina Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, whose name was mentioned often by the Messenger of God, but also he guaranteed the likes of Sa'd paradise. So what about Sayyidina Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas? We see that the Prophet ﷺ, when we mentioned the great companions, some of the companions would stand and they would dance in the presence of the Messenger of God, the likes of Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, Ali bin Abi Talib, and others, by virtue of the fact that the name of the Messenger of God ﷺ was mentioned. Look at our great mother Aisha radiallahu ta'ala, and when Allah mentions her situation in the Quran, she forgets creation. She goes into a state of what the spiritual masters call obliteration, annihilation, where creation disappears, and all she sees is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Her father Abu Bakr in Hadith al-Bukhari, he says, Ushkur Rasulillah. Show gratitude to the Messenger of God because he is the intermediary that Allah spoke about your situation. And she said, La ashkur illallah. I only show gratitude to Allah. And Ibn Abi Jamrah, the great Andalusian Spanish scholar of Bukhari, he says that what is this obliteration? She cannot even see the Messenger of God because now it is Allah speaking directly about her. Uwais gets a portion of that, a portion in that the Messenger ﷺ mentioned him by name. And then he says the context for seerah. And what is the context for seerah? He says to Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab, and he says to Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib, that you know nothing about this man, the Prophet ﷺ, except his shadow. That's it. That's the limit. مَبْلَغُكُم مِّنَ الْعِلْمِ. That is the limit of your knowledge about the Prophet ﷺ, his shadow. And as we will read, if you encounter the great characteristics of the Messenger of God ﷺ, he was of those who cast no shadow. He has no shadow. It's as if they are telling Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab and Sayyidina Ali, you are absolutely ignorant about who he is, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. And we don't see Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab say, watch your tongue, do you know who I am? I'm Umar ibn al-Khattab. And Sayyidina Ali saying, yes, he is Umar and I'm Ali. Who are you saying we don't know nothing about the Messenger of God? That they lower their heads in humility, in recognition of the truth of the words of Sayyidina Uwais al-Qarni uttered. That is how we start seerah, that is how we finish seerah. And seerah is a subject, as we heard our dear brother mention in the beginning, that we must engage from the beginning of our lives as children, hearing the first words of our mothers, likewise until the day we die. When you go to any of the great traditional societies of Islam, that the mothers, even when the child is in gestation inside of the wombs of their mothers, that the seerah will be read aloud so that the child can have talaqi, can embrace the great life and times of the Messenger of God sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Something from the cradle to the grave, min al-lahad ila al-mahad, as the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, min al-mahdi ila al-lahad, from the cradle to the grave, knowledge should be sought, as the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said. So when we look at seerah, there are many different disciplines that one could study with regards to seerah, possibly in the early days, although in the latter days, when sciences have somewhat been, in a sense, categorized into various different sciences, that now you study them as individual sciences, but it gives us, in a sense, a clearer picture of what we should engage when we study the Messenger of God, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The first is his life and times, which ultimately is what we're going to look at, his life and times. And the ulama are going to debate about when does this begin. It's a subtle debate. When you study seerah, where should you begin? The end is pretty obvious. Al-Rafiq al-A'la, Al-Rafiq al-A'la. When it returns back to what? The highest, the supreme company. They were the last words of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. But where is the beginning? There are going to be many of the greatest biographers, from amongst them the great Imam al-Shami, who had the most comprehensive work on the seerah of the Messenger of God sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, as well as another great individual whose name is Sayyidina Yusuf bin Ismail al-Nabawiyy, radiallahu ta'ala, the great Lebanese judge, who preferred to begin the life and times of the Messenger of God sallallahu alayhi wa sallam with the beginning of creation. That's when they began. Because that's when he first began. As we see in the beautiful tradition, Meta kunta Nabawiyy. When they asked the Prophet ﷺ, when were you a prophet? And he said, Kuntu Nabiyyan wa Adam bayn al-ma'i wa teen. Wa kuntu Nabiyyan wa Adam munjadilan bitrinati. That I was a prophet whilst Adam was still between water and clay. Or I was a prophet whilst Adam was still being formed in his clay, his outer form. This is what the Prophet ﷺ said. And this, according to the scholars, is not in the knowledge of God. This is what an existence, a spiritual existence that the Prophet ﷺ had in what? In time immemorial. Sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. So you'll see many of the scholars, this is where they begin that great lofty story. And likewise, we'll see others, and they are the majority, who are going to begin it in terms of not his spiritual existence in times agone, but when he manifests into the earth, manifests in that blessed city of Mecca al-Mukarramah. Okay, that's where most are going to begin the blessed story. And then we're going to study the life and times of the Messenger of God sallallahu alaihi wasallam in relation to the message that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala entrusted him with, and in the context of his people, who were in the genetic sense, the Arabs of Arabia. The second is going to be in the context of the land in which he resided in, which is Arabia in and of itself. And the third most important aspect is the context of the language in which the Prophet ﷺ spoke. These are very, very three important considerations that we will always look at when we gaze into the life and times of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, in a sense as a historical phenomena. Okay, historical phenomena. That's seerah. So we will study the Messenger ﷺ, but we'll also study various types of people. We'll study his family, we'll study his forefathers, those who went before him. We'll study his tribe, and we'll learn that his tribe, although the Prophet ﷺ is an Arab, and it's impermissible for anybody to say that he's not Arab, but he's also not Arab, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, because he's from a unique band of the Arabs that are called the Musta'araba. And the Musta'araba are Arabicized non-Arabs. That's who they are. They are non-Arabs who become Arabs by virtue of their fathers who are non-Arabs marrying into the Arab lineage, i.e. marrying Arab women, and thereafter living in Arabian society and adopting the Arabian tongue. That is the lineage of the Messenger of God sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And some people may pay that no mind, but that's very, very important when we learn that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the only universal messenger. He is sent to all people regardless of race, regardless of color, in all times and in all places, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala joined the two worlds from the perspective of the Arabs, because the Arabs only see the world in two terms when it comes to race. Either you are Arab or you ain't. That's the Arab worldview. The word ajam in the Arabic language means anybody who is not an Arab. So the Prophet ﷺ is Arabi Ajami ﷺ, and this, he has the ability now to convey the word of God to all people. Because if he was an Arab alone, many civilizations would find a good reason to reject him, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, a good reason to reject him if he was not applicable to them in terms of race. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it different in that regard. So we study about his people and about his origin, about his forefathers, who they are. Why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speak about his forefathers? وَتَقَلُّبُكَ فِي السَّاجِدِينَ. That you are what? Taqallub means how you alternate or you sojourn through the loins of your forefathers who are sajideen, people who fall prostrate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Very, very important to understand that not one of the forefathers of the Messenger of God was somebody who ever prostrated to an idol. Not one single one of them. Very, very important. And we're going to see that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he stands in Qurayshi society, he stands in Qurayshi society as the one who has the most glorious lineage of any of those who are present inside of that society. Because were it not so, those people who are aristocrats in that society, may have found good reason to reject him by virtue of his lineage, but they found no good reason, as we see in the Hadith of Abu Sufyan in Sahih al-Bukhari. Okay, so these are considerations we also look at in terms of his life and times, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. In terms of others, and we look at his forefathers, we look at his tribe, we look at those who stood for him from amongst them clans, and we look at those who went against him from amongst them clans. We look at some of the outlying tribes of Arabia, those who heeded the call of the Messenger of God sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because they're very, very important when you hear like a year called the year of the delegations, where all of the varied Arabian tribes from the north, south, east, and west of Arabia will all begin to move onto Madinatul Munawwara in order to stretch their hands forth to the Messenger of God sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Very important considerations. Who were the great individuals who followed them? Who were those great individuals, in another sense, who rejected him sallallahu alaihi wasallam? What was the faith that he brought? Is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam bid'an min ar-rusul? Is he an innovator? Is he brand new? Sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or is he part of a very, 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 very long continuum? Part of that continuum. And how do we study him in the context of that continuum? How do we study the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the context of Sayyidina Isa ibn Maryam, Jesus the son of Mary? Very important, because he's the last prophet who is manifested on earth before the coming of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he's the one also yati min ba'd ismuhu Ahmed. He's the one who gave us glad tidings of the one who will come after me, whose name is Ahmed. Ahmed being the name of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In the heavens, Ahmed fis sama wa Muhammad fil ard. He is Ahmed in the heavens and he is Muhammad upon the face of the earth. So we have to study him in the context of Jesus, that great Judaic messenger. Lest we forget, the Prophet Isa ibn Maryam is a Jew who comes to the Jews. He's not universal, and that is why it's important when we study religion to see why when the religion of Jesus manifests in the world of the Ajam, world of those who are non-Jews, because the Jews also have that dichotomy. You're either Jews or you're Goy. You're either a Jew or you're a Goy, you're a non-Jew. That when the religion of Jesus manifests in the world of the Ajam, the Goy, that it becomes corrupted, distorted, because it will do by nature, because Allah didn't reveal it to the non-Jews. He revealed it solely for the Jews. Jesus comes as a messenger for the Jews. Yet when we see the religion of the Prophet ﷺ, the universal religion of the Messenger of God, manifest beyond the Arabs, we see that it's what? It's like water in its natural habitat. It's natural to every type of people on the face of the earth. We have to study these contexts, although we have a thematic look at the seerah due to the brevity of our time. Another great discipline, and let's go through some of the disciplines that we look at in seerah. The next consideration, which is not looking at the Messenger of God in a historical phenomena, we now look at the Messenger of God abstract. I.e., what did he look like? Sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi wa sallam, and how did he behave? And that is a beautiful science that they call shama'il. Shama'il. And then just like in the same way that Sayyidina Uwais al-Qarni can become ecstatic and cry, because tears are of two types. There the Arabs what they call qurrat al-ayn, they call the coolness of one eye, and that's where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses yani qurrat al-a'yun jaza'an bima kanu ya'malun in Surah Al-Sajdah, about the one who stands by night in prayer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and ukhfiya lahum, he does not know, has no knowledge of what Allah has hidden for that person, min qurrati a'yun, from that which will cool in one's eyes, i.e. make you cry cold tears. What are cold tears? Cold tears are what you call tears of joy. Because the human being has two types of tears, warm tears and cold tears. Cold tears are happiness, a sign of happiness. Hot tears are a sign that somebody is sad, in a state of sorrow and grief. So here that we see Uwais who cries cool tears because he's mentioned. Why was he mentioned by the Prophet ﷺ? Because he was one who mentioned the Prophet ﷺ, jaza'an wifaqa, that it's an appropriate reward. Those who mention shall be mentioned. And shama'al as a discipline is a great discipline in which you learn to habituate your tongue upon the mention of the Messenger of God ﷺ. You learn to habituate your eyes to read great books, works like this, the Mawlid of Imam al-Barzinji as an example, a great Mawlid that all it does is speak about the seerah and the shama'il of the Messenger of God ﷺ. What is amazing that 1500 years after the fact, people can still take a lot of care to write anything about the Messenger of God ﷺ. They don't write it on a scrap of piece of paper, but they will try and write it in the most loftiest and best manners, as we see in this great work that people should ultimately go out and buy, because it's what? It's glorifying your great Messenger ﷺ. Those that mention shall be mentioned. So when we look at the great science of Shama'al, we ask, what does he look like ﷺ? I mean, really, what does he look like? And if we do not know what he looks like, then how then can we find him ﷺ? How then can we single him out ﷺ? Those who are not privy to understand how the Messenger of God ﷺ looked like. They were like those who came into the city of Medina, as we hear in the Hadith al-Sahih, and they couldn't distinguish him from his companions. They couldn't tell which one was Muhammad ﷺ, and that is an allusion in terms of him, to his own humility. But likewise, it's also an allusion to the ignorance some people have about the Messenger of God ﷺ. The children of great generations, where they asked to draw him, they could draw him exactly how he looked ﷺ. Many paid deep attention to how he looked. When we see the great tradition of Abdullah ibn Hudhafa, the great companion at the time of Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab, when he goes on to Caesar, the great Caesar of Rome, and Caesar of Rome, he says to Abdullah ibn Hudhafa, he says, I know what your companion looks like, i.e. the Prophet Muhammad. Abdullah ibn Hudhafa said, you're Caesar in Rome, and he's the Prophet ﷺ and never stepped foot in Rome. How is it you know that he looks like? Prove it. So to which Caesar summons one of his guards, and they bring a portrait of the Messenger of God, a portrait, and Abdullah ibn Hudhafa said, who? That's him. That's him. That's hadith sahih of the great companion radiallahu ta'ala, that people who have the opportunity to take a picture. See, the nature of the great art, they don't need pen and paper, oral people. Why? Because they can etch reality upon their great souls. That's the nature of that great oral community that Sayyidina Abu Bakr and Umar and the likes were from. But others, like the Romans and others, literate people need some type of aid, physical aid, in order to remember things are gone. So they took a picture of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. What's the point? Which one of us could draw him from memory? Which one of us? If we can't, there's a problem with our religion. Because the companions did not preserve his form, except that it becomes etched inside of our reality. And when we don't have a clue, we know what David Beckham looks like, but we have no clue what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ looks like, then we should not wonder when we see bombs dropping upon innocent Muslims. We should not wonder why. Because our success is tied to knowledge of him, and his form is extremely important. You know his form, you begin to have some type of knowledge in the context of ignorance of his great and lofty and universal and unlimited reality. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That is why we see the highest discipline. What is the highest discipline you can study inside of the corpus of Islam? The ulama tells us that the highest discipline you can study is a discipline that's called Haqa'iq al-Muhammadiyah, the Muhammadan realities, studying the reality of that great blessed messenger who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't just send to me and you, or didn't just send to the likes of al-Bukhari and Muslim, or didn't just send to Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman and Ali and Fatima, Zahra al-Batul, Khalil al-Kubra, Aisha radiallahu ta'ala an, but he sent him also to Jesus and to Moses and to Ibrahim and to Noah and to Adam, to each and every single one of the prophets, as recorded in the Quran, Mithaq al-Nabiyyin, the contract, the covenant, every prophet had to take over Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. None of us would be here unless that reality in the hadith in the Tabarani of Ka'b al-Ahbar, the great tabi'i, second generation, who he says, he reports the hadith of Sayyidina Adam, where he stands before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَتَلَقَّى Adam. In Surah Al-Baqarah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Adam تَلَقَّى kalimat. Adam embraced words from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And another reading of the Quran, wasn't Adam who embraced the words. The word embraced Adam. That's a reading of the great 7 readings of the Quran. Now what does Adam? فَتَابَ عَلَيْهِ. Then Allah repents, turned towards Adam. Had Allah not turned towards Adam, we would be in a state of oblivion. Because it's that turning towards Adam that allows time to play itself out. What were the words? Because they're very important words, isn't it? If it's words that caused all of this, what were the words? In the hadith in Tabarani, it was when Adam asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive him, bihaqqi Muhammadin, by the right or virtue of the truth of Muhammad, the reality of Muhammad, to which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to Adam, Muhammad, where did you hear the word of Muhammad? To which whom Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam said, when I gazed upon your throne, I saw upon the great mighty throne that circumambulates the entire cosmos, that it says, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. And I knew that you would not co-fix any name with your name, except if that name was lofty with you, Muhammad. To which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Na'am, ya Adam. Yes, O Adam, وَلَوْلَاهُ مَا خَلَقْتُكَ. If it was not for him, I would not have created you. That's who we're speaking about, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. All the disciplines, like the disciplines of his great miracles, what they call the mu'jizat of the Prophet ﷺ. And you hear some ignorant Muslims, and we should refer to our ignorance often so that we come out of that state, who will say that the Prophet ﷺ has no real recorded miracles, or very few recorded miracles, or his only recorded miracle is the Quran. I mean, that's a statement of absolute ignorance of who he is, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, has more recorded miracles than every prophet in history combined. Okay? And it's a great discipline to study the various miracles that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam came with, because miracles are very, very important. Ordinarily, miracles only speak to a specific age, like the age of Moses is an age of great magic in ancient Kemet or ancient Egypt. Egyptians had mastered magic still to this day. The wizards and the sorcerers, and you see Blaine and all them people who study wizardry, that they see as their great seerah, the ancient Egyptians. That's why we see a lot of them mad folk that on the turn of the millennium, where would you find all of them mad folk? 2,000 recorded on New Year's Eve when the clock strike 12. They were all beneath the great obelisk in where? In Egypt, that's where they all stood. Going back to ancient Egypt. So what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala send to the ancient Egyptians? A great and mighty prophet called Moses, son of Imran, with mighty miracles that show you what? That magic is false, ultimately. That's what he sent in the context of magic, and his miracles are those which manifest in the context of magic, like the staff that he threw down, like his hand going inside of his jade, inside of his garment, and coming out illuminated, radiallahu alayhi salam. Likewise, Jesus in a time of medicine, where what the Judaic people had mastered the art of medicine, so Jesus shows you a different type of medicine. I'm going to bring the dead back to life. The dead back. And a very, very important miracle in our context, because the whole story of Jesus being what? Crucified as an example on the throne. None of us as Muslims have really gone into what do we say about that which took place. We just know that he wasn't crucified. So what about in the Quran? وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ وَمَا صَلَبُوهُ وَلَكِنْ شُبِّهَ لَهُمْ. That he was not killed, nor was he crucified, but it was made to seem as if he was. What does that mean? In a sense, that could actually validate the mistake of Christians inside of what believing Jesus was crucified. Okay? But what is the belief of the Muslims? That he was not crucified, and when the Roman soldiers come to take Jesus, that what happens? That Jesus, Allah through the miracle of Jesus transforms every single one of the disciples into Jesus from the top half up. So when the Romans can't distinguish who is it, which one is Jesus, they say either he comes out or we crucify every single one of you. And therefore one of the disciples steps forth as a martyr for the cause. And he is the one who is taken, placed upon the cross and crucified upon the cross. One of the disciples of Jesus. And then he's the one who's taken to Temple Mount. And then he is the one who is visited by Jesus, who brings him back to life. Restores life in that individual. So he walks as a living man once again. That's important for us to understand that Jesus, as in the Quran, was given the ability to bring the dead back to life, because that was the context he was sent in. The difference with the Prophet ﷺ is, what's his context? His context is universal. So he has miracles that will speak maybe to particular places and particular times, but other miracles that will speak to other particular places and other particular times. Sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam fi akhirati wal ula. The sciences we look at, like the science of Maghazi, the great wars that he partook in, and he was a prophet of wars, and none of us should make an apology for that. They don't apologize for Napoleon, they don't apologize for Nelson, they didn't apologize for Iraq. So why then should we apologize for the fact that our Prophet ﷺ stood on a battlefield 25 times as a glorious prophet? You're never going to see in any culture in the human civilization, except that the greatest ethics of man as a male being, not as a female being, will relate to attributes that are only gained inside of war. That's in all human civilizations. So why then should we be some type of exception, or the prophets be some type of exception? So here's the case with the Messenger of God, who stood on the battlefield 25 times, and likewise he sanctioned another 22 wars in which he never stood. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Great discipline. Another great discipline from seerah, again context for our seerah, or what we call dala'il al-Nabawiyy. This is really important in our time. Prove he's a prophet. And many are going to ask you, prove he's a prophet. We have a discipline of the great Imams who wrote in it, Imam al-Bayhaqi, who has 8 or 9 volumes, and each volume twice the size of this book, which all is about the proofs of prophecy. You want proof he's a prophet, not in a few pages, but in volumes. I will give you proofs that this man is a prophet. That is a discipline that we need to study and become familiar with once again. Many great disciplines. Another discipline that he also make mention of is khasa'is. Imam al-Suyuti, one of the great writers now, what's called khasa'is al-Nabawiyy. Khasa'is looks at the elect qualities of the Prophet ﷺ. So not just his life and times, not what he looked like, or his qualities, or his wars, or his miracles, or the proof that he's a prophet, but now what makes him stand out from all of the beings. Why is he special? Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And likewise, that's another great discipline. Why would it on the day of judgment, and remember this, you want to find a prophet on the day of judgment, look for one standard that is huge, that goes into the heavens. That is called the standard of praise, liwa al-hamd. And the one who holds that standard is Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And he said, Adam wa man dunahu tahta liwa'i yawm al-qiyamah. Adam and everybody other than Adam will be beneath my standard on the day of judgment. The ulama have it that the standard of the Prophet ﷺ being held with him, that's where you'll find over 224,000 prophets who surround the Prophet ﷺ on the day of judgment. Such as you hear the great hadith in Sahih Bukhari and Muslim and others hadith, mutawatir, on the day of judgment, when all the creation begins to flee. To whom? To the prophets, in order for the prophets to intercede with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They've got to know where to find the prophets. Right? There's a lot of folks standing on that great plains on the day of judgment. Where do they find him? They gaze for what the standard. When they see the standard, they head for the standard, and there they will find all the prophets surrounding the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they'll go to Adam, and they'll go to Noah, and they'll go to Ibrahim, and they'll go to Musa as in the tradition, another tradition. Then they go to Isa. But ultimately, where do they end up? At the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he said, "Ana laha, ana laha." That hadith is so important. Why? The one who disbelieves in that tradition by consensus is not a Muslim. Because that hadith is at the level of the Quran. Impossible to reject, otherwise your faith becomes nothing. To reject that incident, that which is going to take place on the day of judgment. Why him over every other prophet? That from his khasa'is. We've got to know why he is so special. Why that is such a special messenger. Because it's like one of the great men of Islam who died in recent times, who wrote his book, which you all have, called Muhammad by Martin Lings. Martin Lings said something interesting for each and every single one of us that our brother confirms here. He said that just bring my people Muhammad, khalas, and the rest will take care of itself. That's it. Teach people about who he was, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and you will see amazing, wondrous things take place in front of your very eyes. But we have to teach people with word, but also in embodiment, how we are. Otherwise, it's hypocrisy. Although the word of the Prophet ﷺ will ordinarily move swiftly towards the hearts of others, regardless of ourselves, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about in the famous verse of of replacement, how He will replace the likes of us with the likes of those yet to come who will give victory to this religion. So what we wanted to do in terms of this, inshallah, this sort of lecture was more sort of set a context for what we're going to study more so. Inshallah, in the next gathering that we'll have slides which inshallah will help sort of give people a greater context for what we're studying and what would be helpful for each and every single one of us. That these are not lectures in order to entertain, but we're trying to regain a glory that has long been lost. And we need one of them things that the Prophet ﷺ told us to have. He said, knowledge is like prey, so use a pen in order to capture your prey. The Prophet ﷺ said. So we need to have a pen, or whatever, an iPod or something we can type notes upon. So we can review this and allow it to etch inside of our hearts. Critical, very, very important. You see, as we said, we've had enough of the days of entertainment. You see, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say what they say about him to be true. For Michael Jackson has died, and let entertainment die with him. Let us come back to the age of where we seek knowledge in order to gain proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So inshallah, if anyone has any questions, inshallah, then we can open the floor, inshallah, for questions.
You mentioned about when Rasulullah was created before absolutely everything. And you mentioned something about the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I didn't quite grasp that.
Okay. The point is that when we speak about creation, creation, what we mean by creation is anything that has a beginning is creation. Anything that has a beginning in time is creation, or a beginning, let's not say in time. Anything that has a beginning is creation. Anything that has no beginning is creator. Okay? So here when we're speaking about creation and creator, when we see creation has a beginning, we mean in the world abstract, not inside of our intellects, not in our knowledge, but abstract, this actually exists. Although this computer may have existed at some time in my mind before I ever had it, I'm not speaking about what's inside of my mind, I'm speaking about where it exists outside of me. Okay? So a lot of times when we speak about in theology, when they speak about in the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, everything existed with Allah in His knowledge before it was even created. Okay? So when we say that the Prophet was a prophet when Adam was still being formed, we don't mean in the knowledge of Allah, because everything was in the knowledge of Allah at that point. So why would he single out, I was a prophet in the knowledge of God? Well, so was Adam in the knowledge of God. So was Jesus. So was Moses. They were all prophets in the knowledge of God at that point in time. So he's saying something different. I was a prophet externally in existence. I actually existed. But the form was not in its physical form. It was in spirit. And that's all of us. All of us have an existence prior to our physical existence. This should be common knowledge for it. It's at 120 days. That prior existence descends into our mother's womb. 120 days in gestation. That's when we become physical creatures in the world. But we were spiritual creatures prior to that, as in the verse in Surah Al-A'raf, which alludes to that. Okay, the answer clear?
What is the difference between seerah and fiqh seerah?
Seerah is a discipline that has been agreed upon. Okay, it's a classical discipline. Fiqh seerah is not necessarily a discipline, but fiqh seerah was like was an attempt by many scholars, from amongst them the likes of Dr. Sa'id Ramadan al-Bouti, the likes of the late Sheikh Muhammad al-Ghazali from Egypt, to look at aspects of the seerah which they could extrapolate law from, or greater understandings of why certain events took place. So in a sense, it's trying to look at the causative reasons, especially as it pertains to law and sometimes theology, on why events take place. That's what fiqh seerah is. But it's not strictly seen as a discipline.
It's a new discipline.
Maybe, we wouldn't say it's a new discipline. We just say that it's a different look at the seerah, but it could become a discipline. That's the nature of how disciplines are born.
We talk about the forefathers of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's a hadith, I'm not sure about the authentication of that hadith, when a man talked to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, my father and your father are in hellfire.
Yeah, the hadith is there. Hadith is sahih. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said,
my hadith, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he passing by al-Abwa, the graveyard of his mother, he said, I asked permission of Allah to visit my mother. I asked permission to ask for forgiveness.
Yeah.
And he said, Allah, let me for the first, but rejected the second. So, though his lineage is a noble lineage, but still they are not Muslim lineage, some of them.
I mean, that's an issue of contention. What we would say, yani, in terms of looking at knowledge in its breadth, that the issue, according to Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the issue of some of the forefathers of the Prophet ﷺ, and when I say some of the forefathers, in particular his parents, and in particular his lineage after Ibrahim, that there are those who go against the majority. So when we say what I said, it's not the consensus of the scholars, but it's the vast majority of the scholars, and that's very important. So there is opinions with regards to his mother and his father, there is opinions, which that opinion in theology is thrown out absolutely with regard to his parents. Why in theology? Because his parents are from a generation that's called Ahl al-Fatra. And Ahl al-Fatra, according to the scholars of theology, are all forgiven. وَلَوْ عَبِدُوا الْأَثْنَانِ, even if they worship idols, because Ahl al-Fatra are a group of people who are between prophets. No prophet comes to them in Surah Yasin, their forefathers were not warned, so they were heedless. And Allah promises in the Quran, وَمَا كُنَّا مُعَذِّبِينَ حَتَّى نَبْعَثَ رَسُولًا. We do not punish anybody until we first send a messenger. So how could the parents of the Prophet be punished when they had no messenger sent unto them? So here the scholars of theology will say that the parents of the Prophet ﷺ, without a shadow of doubt, are people in paradise. And here that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed him to visit his mother. Okay, he's not going to be, we're not allowed to visit the graves of disbelievers, never mind pray for them. So he was allowed to visit, but wasn't allowed to seek forgiveness because it was already guaranteed for it. That's how the ulama understand it. And if you want to study the parents in particular, al-Suyuti, great Hafiz al-Suyuti, considered one of the last great profiles of the Ummah, over 100,000 hadith by memory, the great Abdurrahman al-Suyuti. He has 9 treatises that he wrote on the parents of the Prophet ﷺ. He brought all the hadith that relate to the parents, even the hadith where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because we asked the Prophet in the science of miracles, the Prophet, does he have the miracles of Moses? Does he have the miracles? The Prophet also carried the staff. Does he have the miracles of Jesus? In Tis'a Rasail, of the miracles of Jesus, which is bringing the dead back to life, he brought his own mother back to life at Abwa. Hadith is there, and Suyuti brings his own mother back to life, and then she utters the Shahadatain, and then Allah takes her soul. That's what Suyuti brings in Tis'a Rasail. So it's a vast issue, but at the same time, we're not, how can you say, ta'assub. We have no bias. We're not extremists. We will present, there are differences of opinion, and there are great scholars who stated opposite to that, and from them, the greatest of them, who I know of, is the likes of Imam Nawawi radiallahu ta'ala, who's no small fish, and Nawawi's huge, ala ra's wal ayn. So we have to admit that there are those who go against the opinion, but then Prophet ﷺ said, Kunu ma'al jama'ah, be with the vast majority. Sister, raise your hand. Should women be allowed to go to graveyards of family, relatives, and pious people? I mean, this is the question is a fiqh question. It relates to fiqh. So I can only answer in accordance to the fiqh I studied, which is the school of Imam al-Shafi'i radiallahu ta'ala an. And the Prophet ﷺ said, and the basis of that is, Kuntu nahaytukum an ziyaratul qubur. I used to prevent you from visiting graves. فَزُورُوهَا now visit graves, فَإِنَّهَا يُذَكِّرُكُمْ بِالْآخِرَةِ, and because it reminds you of the hereafter. And here in that hadith, that there is no specification of male over female. The hadith in and of itself will allude to two things. First and foremost, it is recommended to visit graves, recommended, because in legal theory, the Prophet begins with a negation, and then he follows that with a command. And in legal theory, a command after negation alludes to something being recommended. That's a legal principle. And likewise, you've got no takhsis of it being men over women. There's nothing here saying that this is only men or not women. So ordinarily, it's recommended to go, and it is for men and women to go, except in the school of Imam Shafi'i radiallahu ta'ala, it is disliked for women to go to visit graveyards. Disliked. Okay, it's disliked. The reason why, because of the emotions of women. Women ordinarily not having the mastery over their emotions that men do have. And you can say, in a sense, men are cold, women ain't. But being cold is sometimes a good quality at a graveyard, because it allows you to have adab with those who are in the grave. Okay? But what the school of Imam Shafi'i said, that if a woman is somebody who can control her emotions, then it moves into the sphere of being permissible, even recommended for her to go into the graveyard to visit the pious. But the key point is she must control her emotions when she visits the grave. Is it just that has been created beforehand, or all of us? No. Is it just Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has been created before Adam, or all of us? I mean, that's sort of a different topic. Huh? But here, when we speak about Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam, without doubt, it's not open for question, is the first being created in terms of spirit and form. That's why he's our father in spirit and form. The human being is a juxtaposition of form, his physical nature, as well as soul, spirit, his ruh. Okay? So in terms of ruh, well, jasad, and that's why in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, hadith I said, I was a prophet, kuntu nabiyyan, wa Adam, bayna al-ma' wa teen, between water and clay, munjadilan between atihi. Another version, he was still intermingling inside of his clay. Clay always refers to a form. In another narration of the hadith, وَآدَمْ بَيْنَ الرُّوحِ وَالْجَسَدِ, Adam was between spirit and physical form. That's another narration of the same hadith, which comes in a Tabarani. Okay? So here, soul and physical form, Adam is the first. What we're speaking about here is the world of souls. Souls which are created entities. Going to Abu Hamid al-Ghazali and the people of knowledge, that soul is a created entity. Okay? So that the Prophet ﷺ is the first soul created. And you'll find that especially in the hadith of the Musnad of Abdul Razak as-San'ani. Okay? As for the other prophets, we don't speak about that which we have no knowledge of. Assalamu alaikum. Do you recommend any specific? I mean, the Sea of Nectar, I mean, I've heard that's a good book, and I have the book, but to be honest, I've never read the book. I skimmed through it, but I've never read it in detail, so I couldn't necessarily recommend the Sea of Nectar, but I've heard it's a good book. Okay? Martin Lings is a good book, read Martin Lings, although there are aspects in Martin Lings that are problematic. Okay? And so, when one gets, follow your heart, the Prophet ﷺ, you get to a point that doesn't feel right in your heart, then ask somebody. Who may know to clarify that. But Martin Lings in a few places has some strange opinions with regards to the Prophet ﷺ. But generally in English language, it's the best book you can get on the Prophet ﷺ. And if people want to follow, within the age of one of the people, his name is Imam. He wrote a real brilliant book in orality, the nature of orality. People should read because it refers back to our tradition being an oral tradition. That he quotes something, he has what he calls primary orality and secondary orality. Primary orality is like the time of the Prophet ﷺ. You see, primary orality is when somebody has no frame of reference for writing, and they don't even know what writing is. They have no frame of reference. It's not like they know how to read and write and they forgot, or they see reading and writing going around them, but they don't they pay no attention to it. But in regards to the Prophet ﷺ, so that's primary orality. Secondary orality, he said, are like our civilizations now. He said we're moving towards an age of secondary orality. That although that read, write books, we learn that in school, we're moving to an age where people are no longer going to read and write. That's what television, that's what internet does. It's going to strip that away from the human being. I think it's a really important observation. Okay? Tayyib. So I forgot the point I was saying. So the point being is that Martin Ling's is a decent book. And is a Sheikh Hamza's tapes. Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, who has his tapes, I think it's 24 or what have you, tapes on the life and times of the Prophet ﷺ. For those who are moving towards secondary orality, they may find that better than Martin Ling's. So inshallah, that's another good thing. You mentioned that we must know the image of the Prophet ﷺ. So why is it prohibited to have images of the Prophet ﷺ? Because why? I mean, you read something like Ong's book, you'll understand what the printed word does. When they say like a word, like a picture speaks 1,000 words. You see, like words or pictures, forms by their innate nature, they begin to limit something that wasn't limited in that way in the first place. Because each and every single one of us, when we all to read the description of the Prophet ﷺ and master them in knowledge, that each and every single one of us possibly could manifest that in a different way. And ordinarily that different way is going to be a projection of our soul onto the Messenger of God sallallahu alaihi wasallam. An example which I always found funny was an individual, a Dajjal. He was a Dajjal, one of the liar prophets. The Prophet I'm told would come. His name was Dr. York. Yeah, he was a doctor. I don't know if he was from York, but he lived in Brooklyn, New York. Maybe that's why he called himself Dr. York. And he found a cult called the Ansar cult. Any of our youngsters who were into rap music, if you look at the rap music of the 90s, of the 80s and the 90s, it was heavily influenced by this cult rap music, when rap music was supposed to be conscious. And they could have this Dr. York, who had a proper religious sect. And if you saw them in the streets of Brooklyn, New York, they dressed just like Sunni Muslims. They had turbans and thobes, and they had scarves, and they would, Assalamu alaikum, brother. And you could be fooled, and many were fooled to think that these were the real deal. But they were dajjals, they were liars. Okay? Anyway, ala kulli hal, in one of his books, I read his works, Dr. York. In one of his books, Dr. York had a picture that only he had access to of all of the prophets. And it's funny, why? Because all the prophets look like him. Every single one, the prophets look like him, Jesus looked like him, Moses looked like him. They all look like him. You see, that is just a lie, obviously, but there's an element of truth in that. What's the element of truth? That Allah has prohibited images for a reason, so we can relate to the prophets. Because with the Prophet ﷺ, the color of the Prophet, like an example, Abiyad. What's the color of the Prophet ﷺ? White. That's the color. Abiyad. Mushawwash bil humra, that had redness, tinges of redness in it. What does white mean? Example, if you study logic, the science of mantiq, logic, really important science in Islam, logic, they speak about words that have a definitive meaning. I use a word, it means what it says. And words that have multiple shades of meaning. They can mean many different things. When they demonstrate a word that has multiple shades of meaning, the example they use is white. That's in the books of our logic, like Isa al-Ghoshi and the Sunnah and the Munarak. These great books we study logic in Islam. That they're going to show you a word that has multiple meanings is white. And I experienced, I was in Mauritania. I was in Mauritania once. I was there with a few brothers, some of them like Yahya Rodis and others. We were in Mauritania. We were trying to build our tents in Mauritania. You have to go to the village. You have to buy all your wood and your material, not your wood, your material and all the stuff you need. Go back to the desert and then begin to construct your own tent you're going to live in. So we were there in a marketplace. So I'm there negotiating with this Mauritanian woman for some material. And she's striking a hard deal. So I've got to show that I'm from Liverpool and Scousers don't take their pennies lightly. So then I started to negotiate a lot harder. And then she started asking, where are you from? So I started the conversation. And then I said, what about you? And she said, well, I'm so-and-so, and I'm white. That's what she said. I'm not Barney, she said. I said, no, you're not white. You are not white, believe me. She said, I'm not Barney. And she kept on, I said, no, you're not white. That's the Barney. You're not white. And she kept on saying, and she starts getting mad. I'm not Barney. She starts getting really mad. And at this moment, like my friend Yahya Rodis, he walks past, and I said, Uncle, who are Baydani? That's white. She goes, هو ليس بيضاني هو نصراني. Oh, he's not white, he's a Christian. That's what she said. That's not white. This is white, what I look like, which was what we'd call in our society black. But in their society, she was just lighter than black people, so she's white. So the point being is that the Prophet ﷺ being white is a beautiful description of him. Okay, it's very beautiful because it allows every civilization has white people. And although he's not like all of those white people, but at least gives them something they can relate to with regards to the Messenger of God, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Pictures would destroy that, like it destroyed Jesus when they painted Jesus. Many cultures found that good reason to reject the blessed Messenger of Jesus, the son of Mary, alayhi salam. I read the Quran more easily in phonetic English. I do Arabic. Is this wrong? What does phonetic English mean? Transliteration, does that mean? Okay, again, it's fiqh according to the Shafi'i school that it's haram to read in phonetic English. That's what the Shafi'i school says. Because the Shafi'i school, and it's not the Shafi'i school, all schools of jurisprudence agree that the revelation of the Quran is not only in word, but it's in script. The script, okay? The script, and we don't mean the script with the fatha dhammas or with the dots. It's just the shape of the letters without dots and without the lines of the diacritical marks. That shape is from revelation, so it's untouchable, it cannot be touched. So to change that into Latin letters, that's what the transliteration, which maybe is what meant by phonetic English here. To change that is considered change in revelation with the Shafi'i school of jurisprudence. So what I'd say is maybe ask somebody who studies in other schools whether it's permissible. That's the problem. And the point being, which I just learned in my own sort of, inshallah, learning of this religion, but I in the beginning of my Islam, read with transliteration. And what I realized, that prevented me from learning Arabic, which is very easy to learn the script, for years. Because now I could read the Quran in transliteration, so I had no need to learn the Arabic script. And I have many teachers who taught the Arabic script people to read fluently inside of 10 days, 10 lessons. It's not difficult. Allah says we've made the remembrance easy, and that includes recitation, reading of the script, which is the means to understanding it. Was the Prophet ﷺ strong physically? Yes, the Prophet ﷺ had the strength of 40 men. All of the Prophets ordinarily have the strength of multiple men. The Prophet ﷺ had the strength of 40 individuals, of immense strength, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. You mentioned that we must know the image of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We've read that. And then can a newly convert pray in English before learning how to pray in Arabic? Then we have to sort of, again, that retains to fiqh in the Shafi'i school. No. In the Shafi'i school of jurisprudence, and that's what I can speak against, you can't recite in English. The prayer is in Arabic, and it cannot be placed into any other language. And if somebody does not know the Fatiha, then in the Shafi'is, because they're new Muslims, they should either just make dhikr, like Subhanallah, 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 in them places, or they should remain silent. That's according to the Shafi'is. But they ordinarily have to begin the arduous task of learning it, with the Shafi'i school of jurisprudence having a specific period of time, which I think is very, very important, because in Western culture you're a new Muslim for life. And where does that concept come from? In Shafi'i school of jurisprudence you're a new Muslim for 6 months, and then you're a Muslim, you can drop the new. So you basically got 6 months to sort of get, unless you live in a land where there's no scholars, or you live in a land that's far from the lands of Islam, you have an extension of that period. But if that's not the case, 6 months, and you better get with it, and we better get with it, because usually it's us who are more familiar with the religion, who abandon those who are new. A lot of times turn them the other opposite direction outside of the door. Inshallah. Not a question. Is there any text that we're going to use? No, they're thematic looks, so there is no text, although I'll give Javid a copy of this. This is what we use in the micro madrasa. Okay, it's a text by one of the great Hadrami scholars called Imam Bahraq. And it's basically a timeline of the seerah. And I think so generally what I moved in terms of these thematic looks is towards a timeline. Okay, so we'll look at the seerah in forms of timeline, although I'm not going to comment word by word, as we do in the micro madrasa as an example, on Bahraq's text. So so basically in the next session this will be distributed, so this text, and maybe this will be a good sort of brief text one can read in order to sort of keep with it, inshallah. How about a man who pierced his ear and realized it is forbidden? Just take the earring out. And it's Miktober, it's all good. How long does it take for a man to be mature enough to get married? That's the question, isn't it? From seerah to marriage, I said seerah contains everything. On the question, so how long does it take for a man to be mature enough to get married? That depends upon the man, that depends upon his environment. Ordinarily, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us a sign that what marriage, ordinarily in a healthy society, one is ready at the point of what? That you can procreate. That's what's called legal maturity in Islam. The point where you can be the causative reason for another being coming into existence, i.e. you can give birth, or be the male being the one who what? Helps give birth in a sense. Then what? Then you, in a sense, are mature enough to get married, although that's not the case in our societies, that prolonged childhood, okay? We prolong childhood, like you look at some of these, like fashion now. There's a really good, brilliant book I once read called the ISIS Papers. ISIS Papers, we look at the psychology of modern culture, a particular specific aspect of modern culture. And what I looked at was more so how childhood had been prolonged. And you could see that in the way people spoke and the way people dressed and people walked. Like we look at a lot of modern people, look how they dress. They dress like children. I mean, their trousers are halfway down their backside. They're showing their nappies. That's how children dress. And that's how modern man dresses in a fashionable sense. Isn't it fashionable to dress like that? That's problematic. It's a sign that people are not mature enough in order to what? One of the poets he wrote, babies having babies, and I don't know why. That's what it is. Babies having babies. And it creates a crisis inside of our social habitats. So we've got to ask certain things about when are we mature enough. I mean, the Arabic language, mashallah, they have that in their language. In the language of the Arabs, there's a form in Arabic which, if you use that form, it means you've reached an age where you are mature enough to be married. You see, I mean, it's something that the human being, rites of passage, has to, in a sense, head towards. You see, but we've lost all sense of that. So again, it's relative. Allahu A'lam. A lot of times in our day and age, people got to be in their 60s to be mature enough.
I just have another question. If somebody wants to acquire knowledge, but their parents, in a way, prohibit them, in a way. Say they want to go to madrasa abroad, but the parents say that we'd rather you study,
Yeah, just tell your parents, I'm going abroad to become a doctor.
They lie.
No, you're not lying. It's just a different type of doctor. And to study with doctors, Allah and His Messenger. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, when he was dying, Abu Bakr, he said to Abu Bakr, shall we bring you a doctor? And he said, the doctor made me sick. That's what he said. And he meant by the doctor, Allah. Amradani tabib, Allah. That's what he meant. So just khalas, use what they call a tawriya, be slick with language. But the reality is that knowledge is classified in different classifications. What's called fard ayn knowledge which is obligatory for anybody to know, then nobody can prevent you from that, even your parents. It's not considered disobedience to parents for somebody to seek what is called obligatory knowledge. Anything which is not obligatory, even if it's highly recommended, it is disobedience to seek that knowledge without the permission of your parents. So what we say is that if it's something that you have to know by the nature of what? The questioning on the Day of Judgment that you're ignorant of, then you don't let ta'atili makhluqin ma'a ma'asiyat al-khaliq. The Prophet ﷺ said there's no obedience to creation when it constitutes disobedience to the Creator. Okay, but that knowledge only refers to obligatory knowledge.
So what if, the obligatory knowledge you can acquire from books locally?
You can't.
You can't.
Books you can't acquire from books. Simple enough. So knowledge is taken from teachers. If you're going to acquire it from teachers.
Okay, say local teachers.
Yeah, then khalas, you don't have to travel. And some scholars, I asked one of my teachers that, what about if somebody has teachers locally that they can study obligatory knowledge from, but they'd rather go to Damascus or Mauritania or Egypt or Yemen or what have you? Do they have good reason to to do that when you can seek it locally, he said there's nothing in the books which stipulates distance. That was his answer to it. And that's all I pay for my teacher. There's nothing that stipulates, i.e., that there's nothing which says you have to go to the nearest teacher as opposed to the furthest teacher. There's nothing which says that in the books. Okay? Which in a sense, what he's saying is that it's valid still for somebody to travel to the four corners of the earth, even for obligatory knowledge, even if he finds the best teacher in his environment. That's what I think. Now,
when the Prophet says seek knowledge as far as China, would that include earthly knowledge or just Islamic knowledge?
طيب يعني in terms of seek knowledge اطلب العلم يعني ولو إلى الصين, the hadith is weak, it's ضعيف, the hadith is weak. Although the scholars say the meaning is sound, i.e. that يعني seek knowledge even to China, even further than China. You understand? So, but that hadith in of itself is weak. And ordinarily, whenever the Prophet ﷺ said al-ilm, see we can't use that hadith as a dalil simply because of necessarily because of its weakness. In terms of like as a strict law, although now we know this, saying fada'il al-amal, that's what the scholars say in terms of good practice, that you can't use weak hadith, but what's the point? If you use al-ilm, when the Prophet says al-ilm, like utlub al-ilm, i.e. the knowledge, he means by that only sacred knowledge. When he says ilm, without the al, he means that by any knowledge that is recommended, okay? But ordinarily the ulama, we're going to allow people, are going to say that it's good for people to seek knowledge, even if it's non-sacred knowledge, regardless of where that may be, so long as that is something that is recommended. And then the point being that many of us have to understand what is recommended knowledge that is non-sacred from the mundane and what is not recommended. We have to understand that also. Some of us may use that as an example to go, I'm not saying to be arbitrated, but like in Greece, as we took an example, to seek philosophy, using the hadith, well, philosophy by the consensus of the ancient scholars is haram to study philosophy. Haram. Nobody says it's permissible to study philosophy. So that hadith just doesn't act in their stead in that regard. Why can you not study from books? You can't study from books because there's no guarantee that what you study from a book is going to be sound. Teachers guarantee the soundness of the transmission. Books are merely aids in that process. I mean, they aid the teacher. That's why the ulama say, كان العلم في الصدور. He said knowledge was in the breasts of men. ثم انتقل إلى السطور. Then it moved onto the pages of books. ولكن الرجال بقوا مفاتيح العلم. But men and great women remain the keys to them books. So knowledge is what? Is through human beings. That's the nature of this religion. Remember the Prophet ﷺ in Bukhari, he says, نحن أمة أمية. We are an oral nation. And in case you want to, what does ummiyya mean? It means oral. We speak, and then he clarified it. لا نكتب. We're not people of books. ولا نحسب. We're not people of calculations. That's hadith Sahih Bukhari. And the ulama like the Shatibi noted in the Muwafaqat have commented on this hadith, the stamp of his ummah. You take knowledge from people, not from books. Books can just aid in that process, but we can't rely upon them. That's it. As a doctor, I am often faced with a dilemma on the day of Jum'ah. I am on call and cannot leave my patients who get covered at the time of Jum'ah prayer. I feel very guilty. Please advise. And Allah Alam. But my knowledge, I can't answer that question, inshallah. Inshallah. Keep that question if you can ask, try and get that. What about can you do this? That is when they are And what about Nabawiyy? Can you do this without your parents' permission? That is when they are worried about your spendings, financial commitments in regard to family, future and savings. I mean, parents are extremely important, so the advice is not to do anything without one's parents' permission. Okay? Turn towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A lot of times we forget. The reason why our parents don't change their mind on matters is because Allah doesn't change their hearts, because we never petitioned Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The dua that the Prophet ﷺ would say most often, his greatest dua, Ya muqallib al-qulub, oh the one who changes or transforms hearts. That was a great dua of the Prophet ﷺ, hadith in Ahmed of Mother Aisha and Salama radiallahu ta'ala anhuma. So we should become people who petition Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we have obedience to our parents, we are being obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then we petition Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala based upon that obedience. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to keep you inside of His obedience, so He will change their hearts such that you move into a new and more higher state of obedience. I mean, your parents, they don't have rock solid hearts. They have hearts that love their children. So people should go to the one who ultimately loves all of his creations, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you'll see the hearts will be transformed. Try it. That's what the ulama say. A lot of times they'll say, khalas. Ulama will say, look, I'm giving you this advice, but try the advice. Because thousands, millions have tried it and they've seen that it's worked. So why should we be any type of exception? Let's call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and all about it. Same answer. If it's fard ayn knowledge, then there's no difference between male and female in terms of fard ayn knowledge. Okay? Although the scholars, there is differences of opinion on that. Like in the books of the Lord, the high books of Imam Shafi'i, there are differences of opinion on whether, because the issue is not more so about your parents here, it's more so about the issue of mahram, of legal escort. Okay? As for leaving without your parents' permission, it's fard ayn knowledge, women are the same as men. The only restriction a woman has in that instance alone is the issue of what? Of a legal escort. If she has a legal escort, then she can leave. If she doesn't have a legal escort, then the scholars of jurisprudence in Shafi'i madhab are on a difference of opinion. And difference of opinion, it relates to whether a woman when can a woman travel without a legal escort. That's what it relates to in the Shafi'i school. Hajj they agree upon, other acts they disagree upon. And then the same applies in the last answer. The sister should petition Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And again, our women, they have, in terms of the first generation, i.e. the generation of teachers of the Sahaba, they have the greatest legacy in our mother Aisha. Our mother Aisha was the greatest teacher of all of the Sahaba. She produced the greatest scholars of the next generation, Aisha radiallahu anha. So the women have a greater legacy even than the men in terms of non-prophets. Although the legacy in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who in that the reality is beyond gender, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is beyond and cult, but khalas, the legacy is also there for men also. Right? Yeah. It's the same answer. The same answer. If it's fard ayn knowledge, then there's no difference between male and female in terms of fard ayn knowledge. Okay? Although the scholars, there is differences of opinion on that. Like in the books of the Lord, the high books of Imam Shafi'i, there are differences of opinion on whether, because the issue is not more so about your parents here, it's more so about the issue of mahram, of legal escort. Okay? As for leaving without your parents' permission, it's fard ayn knowledge, women are the same as men. The only restriction a woman has in that instance alone is the issue of what? Of a legal escort. If she has a legal escort, then she can leave. If she doesn't have a legal escort, then the scholars of jurisprudence in Shafi'i madhab are on a difference of opinion. And difference of opinion, it relates to whether a woman when can a woman travel without a legal escort. That's what it relates to in the Shafi'i school. Hajj they agree upon, other acts they disagree upon. And then the same applies in the last answer. The sister should petition Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And again, our women, they have, in terms of the first generation, i.e. the generation of teachers of the Sahaba, they have the greatest legacy in our mother Aisha. Our mother Aisha was the greatest teacher of all of the Sahaba. She produced the greatest scholars of the next generation, Aisha radiallahu anha. So the women have a greater legacy even than the men in terms of non-prophets. Although the legacy in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who in that the reality is beyond gender, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is beyond and cult, but khalas, the legacy is also there for men also. Right?